We need help right now.
It's coming. Oh God, it's coming.
Naima sat by the window in her quiet home, one hand resting on her swollen belly. The late evening light cast shadows on the living room walls. She was over 8 months pregnant with twins, and each passing day brought equal parts joy and anxiety. But tonight, her heart felt heavier than ever. Her husband, CEO Preston Aldridge, was absent yet again, buried in work and oblivious to her loneliness. Naima's reflection in the glass revealed tearful eyes, a mix of exhaustion and disappointment. She had imagined this phase of life so differently, a doting husband by her side, eagerly awaiting the birth of their children. Instead, she often found herself alone in cavernous silence, wondering when Preston had drifted so far away. It hadn't always been like this. In the early days of their marriage, Preston was attentive and kind, sweeping Naima off her feet with grand gestures and genuine laughter. As his tech company skyrocketed in success, however, Preston changed. Board meetings replaced date nights. Phone calls to investors interrupted their intimate dinners. Naima tried to be understanding. After all, Preston claimed he was working hard for their future, but somewhere along the way his ambition morphed into neglect. Now, as she felt the twins shift inside her, Naima questioned if her husband even remembered the feeling of her hand in his. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. A summer storm was brewing, echoing the turmoil in Naima's heart. She gently rubbed her belly, whispering soothing words to her unborn babies, as if to comfort them from the tension at home. "Mommy's here," she murmured softly. "I'll keep you safe." It was a promise made in love, though she silently wished Preston would make the same promise to her. Instead, he was nowhere to be seen, once again choosing corporate battles over the well-being of his growing family. Naima's thoughts wandered to the ongoing feud that had consumed her husband. His mind, a bitter rivalry with another billionaire, Theo Voss. She'd heard the name in passing, on financial news, in Preston's frustrated rants. Theo Voss was Preston's fiercest competitor, a tech magnate who always seemed one step ahead. Preston spoke of Theo with venom, calling him that conniving enemy who was out to ruin him. Naima had never met Theo, but she knew the rivalry had only driven Preston to double down on work. He was determined to beat Theo at any cost, even if that cost was neglecting his wife in her final weeks of pregnancy. As rain began to patter against the window, Naima closed her eyes and took a steady breath. She knew stress was bad for the babies, and she resolved to stay calm. Perhaps Preston would walk through the door any moment now with an apologetic smile and an embrace, telling her his meeting ended early. Maybe tonight will be different, she hoped. Maybe he'll remember what day it is. It was their anniversary. Or it would be, for another few hours. Naima glanced at the untouched dinner on the table. She had cooked Preston's favorite meal, a small effort to rekindle a spark. But the meal sat cold and uneaten, just like her efforts to reach her husband's heart lately. A single tear rolled down her cheek. If there was one thing she had learned in recent months, it was that love should never feel so lonely. Before we continue with Naima's story, I want to take a moment to welcome you to the channel. If you're new here, we share powerful stories of love, betrayal, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. Now, I have to warn you, what happens next to Naima will have you on the edge of your seat. A storm is coming, both literally and figuratively, and the man who shows up in her darkest hour, it's the last person you'd ever expect. If you're already hooked and want to see how this unfolds, do me a quick favor. Tap that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Trust me, you're going to want to be here for the ending. Alright, let's get back to Naima. Her phone just buzzed with a message from Preston, and what he says next. It's going to break your heart. Naima's phone buzzed on the table, startling her from her thoughts. Her heart leapt with a flicker of hope as she snatched it up. Perhaps it was Preston finally calling. She swiped the screen eagerly, only to see a brief text message. "Preston, caught up at work. Don't wait up. We'll try to be home late." The message was curt, devoid of any warmth or acknowledgement of their anniversary. Naima's shoulders slumped. She reread the text, her chest tightening with hurt. He forgot. He truly had forgotten the significance of today. Or worse, he remembered and just didn't care. Neither possibility gave her comfort. She typed a reply with trembling fingers. "Preston, I haven't been feeling well. I really need you home." Before she could hit send, 3 little dots appeared. He was typing another message. She waited, eyes fixed on the screen. Another message popped up. "Preston, it's important, Naima. Investor dinner. I'll make it up to you." Naima blinked away fresh tears. Make it up to me. How many times had she heard that line? Empty promises had become Preston's specialty. She quickly sent her reply, desperation creeping into her words. "Please, I'm getting worried. The babies. I feel strange." This time, the dots on the screen appeared, then disappeared without a reply. Preston had seen the message, she was sure of it, but he offered no comfort. No reassurance that he would drop everything and rush to her side. He had made his choice, and once again, it wasn't his wife. In frustration, Naima tossed the phone onto the sofa cushion. A wave of pain suddenly rippled through her abdomen, causing her to wince. It wasn't just the heartache. A real physical discomfort was growing. She inhaled deeply and exhaled as she had learned in her birthing class, trying to determine if this was a contraction or just Braxton Hicks' false labor. At 9 months, along with twins, she was hyper-attuned to every twinge. The obstetrician had warned her that twins often come early and that stress could elevate her blood pressure. She pressed 2 fingers to her wrist and felt her pulse racing. Was it anxiety or something more dangerous? Naima carefully stood up, steadying herself against the couch until the cramp subsided. She decided to call her doctor just to be safe. The phone rang as she paced slowly. Thunder growled outside, the rain, intensifying, matching her rising worry. Finally, the answering service picked up. The doctor on call advised her to monitor her symptoms and not hesitate to go to the hospital if the pains grew regular or severe. They also suggested resting and staying hydrated. Rest, hydration. Naima let out a bitter laugh. Rest was elusive when your mind was in turmoil. She poured herself a glass of water in the kitchen, noticing how her hands shook, sloshing the liquid. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. In a perfect world, her husband would be by her side right now, holding her hand, timing her contractions, reassuring her that everything would be all right. Instead, she was alone, bracing herself on the cool marble counter as another ripple of pain coursed through her abdomen. "I have to stay calm," she told herself, sipping the water and taking slow breaths. But calmness was hard to find. Her gaze fell on the framed photo on the kitchen wall, she and Preston. On their wedding day, smiling radiantly under a shower of rose petals. That joyful man in the picture was a far cry from the distant CEO he had become. Naima wondered if Preston ever looked at that photo anymore, or had he buried those memories under piles of contracts and financial reports. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the empty foyer where Preston should have been coming home by now. The emptiness of the house was palpable. Unable to bear the silence, Naima turned on the TV, flipping to a financial news channel out of morbid curiosity. Perhaps they'd mention Preston's meeting, or show a glimpse of the event he was attending. Sure enough, a ticker at the bottom of the screen scrolled updates about a high-profile tech CEO gathering at the Grand Vista Hotel downtown. The anchor was discussing a rumored merger deal. Naima's breath caught. That was Preston's deal. He'd been preparing for weeks to secure funding for an expansion, likely. The very reason he felt justified in missing their anniversary. As the camera feed switched to the lobby of the hotel, Naima's eyes widened. There was Preston, looking sharp in his tailored suit, gliding through a crowd of executives with a confident smile. By his side was a tall man with an air of relaxed authority. The TV caption identified him as Theodore Voss, CEO of Voss Dynamics. Theo Voss, the enemy. Naima leaned forward, drawn in by the live footage. The two rivals were forced to share the same space tonight, it seemed. She watched as Preston and Theo eyed each other coolly, a polite but cold nod, exchanged. Even through the screen, the tension was evident. The anchor's commentary droned on about how the rivalry between Aldridge Innovations and Voss Dynamics was the talk of the tech world, with both CEOs vying for the top spot in AI-driven solutions. To Naima, it was just proof of what she already knew. Preston's obsession with beating Theo had consumed him entirely. As she stood there in the flickering glow of the television, Naima felt another pang in her belly, sharper this time and unmistakably rhythmic. She gasped softly and pressed a hand to her abdomen. This was not just a random cramp. It felt like the start of labor. A glance at the wall clock made her stomach drop. It was too early by a couple of weeks for the twins, and the stress of the evening certainly wasn't helping. Okay, babies, hold on, she whispered, trying to steady the tremor in her voice. Panic tried to claw its way in, but she fought it down. If this truly was labor or a medical emergency, she needed to move. She needed to get to the hospital now, with or without her husband. Naima turned off the TV and dialed Preston's number, hoping that seeing his rival on the same broadcast might mean his meetings were over or at least paused. The phone rang and rang. No answer. She tried again, and this time he picked up, but not to speak to her. She heard his muffled voice talking to someone else, likely having inadvertently answered in his pocket. Over the line, amid background chatter, she clearly heard Preston's voice, impatient and irritated. Yes, I'll handle it. My phone's blowing up tonight. Then, abruptly, the call cut off. He had hung up on her. Tears of pain and frustration welled in Naima's eyes. Preston knew she was trying to reach him, and still chose to ignore her. Clutching her belly, she realized she could wait no longer. If her husband wouldn't come to her, she would go to him, or at least get herself to the hospital. She grabbed her coat and the pre-packed hospital bag that had been sitting by the door for weeks, just in case. A contraction, she was almost certain now that's what it was, gripped her, making her double over and grit her teeth. They were coming more regularly, each a little stronger than the last. Fear drummed in her chest. This is too soon, she thought. They're not due yet, and I'm alone. Summoning her strength, Naima straightened up and stepped out into the stormy night. The rain was torrential, soaking her within seconds as she struggled to the car. Wind lashed at her, and thunder boomed overhead. She fumbled with her keys, her fingers slick with rain and sweat. Finally managing to unlock the door, she eased herself into the driver's seat. A flash of lightning illuminated the driveway as she started the engine. The hospital was across town, and under normal circumstances about a 20-minute drive, but tonight, with the storm and her condition, it felt like an impossible distance. As she backed out of the driveway, another contraction made her cry out. She had never driven in such pain before, and certainly never while on the verge of labor. Breathing hard, Naima flipped on the headlights and wipers and steered toward the main road, praying she could make it safely. Rain pounded on the windshield as Naima drove through dark, slick streets. Each contraction was closer and more intense than the last, forcing her to bite down on her lip to keep from screaming. Focus. Just focus on the road, she told herself, blinking back tears. The twins were coming, whether she was ready or not, and right now, all that mattered was getting to the hospital. Her phone was on the passenger seat, screen glowing with the last call to Preston still on the call log. She didn't have the strength or concentration to try dialing again. Instead, between contractions, she hit the speed dial for her neighbor and close friend, Aisha. No answer, likely already asleep at this late hour. She left a desperate voicemail, Aisha. It's happening. I'm in labor, I think. I'm heading to County General now. I'm alone. Please, if you get this, meet me there. Her voice cracked on the last word as another wave of pain crashed over her. Naima groaned, one hand reflexively clutching her belly as she eased off the accelerator. The car skidded slightly. The combination of intense pain and flooded streets made it perilous to drive. She knew she should pull over and call for an ambulance, but she feared stopping would leave her stranded alone in the storm. So she pressed on, heart pounding both from exertion and anxiety. Lightning turned the night to day for a split second, and in that flash, Naima saw the green highway sign for the downtown exit approaching. County General Hospital was only a few miles beyond that exit. Almost there. "Hang on, babies," she pleaded silently. As she took the exit ramp, her vision blurred with another contraction. Her body was telling her to push, far too early, and in the worst possible place. "No, no, not yet," she cried out, trying to shift in the seat to alleviate the pressure. In her distraction, she didn't see the figure darting across the intersection until it was too late. Naima slammed on the brakes, the car hydroplaning before screeching to a halt. Her heart nearly jumped out of her chest. Had she hit someone? A dark shape was now collapsed on the road just ahead of her headlights. Panic surged through her. Someone had been out in this storm, and she might have struck them. Ignoring her own pain for a moment, Naima threw the car into park and struggled out into the rain. A man was on his hands and knees in the crosswalk, drenched and disoriented, apparently having slipped or jumped out of the way. "Oh my God, are you hurt?" Naima shouted over the storm, rushing toward him as fast as her pregnant body would allow. Her heart was pounding with dread that she might have caused an accident. The man looked up, blinking rainwater out of his eyes. He was younger than she expected, maybe mid-30s, with rain-soaked brown hair, plastered to his forehead, and a sharp, handsome face contorted in surprise. Recognition flashed between them in the dim light. Naima realized with shock that she had seen this man on TV just minutes ago. It was Theodore Voss, Preston's rival, still in his suit, but without the jacket, as if he'd been running through the storm in desperation. The likelihood of meeting him here at this hour was astounding. Theo, for his part, seemed equally stunned. He got to his feet unsteadily. I'm okay," he panted, raising a hand in thanks. "I didn't mean to startle you. My car skidded off the road back there, and I was trying to get help." His voice trailed off as he got a better look at Naima, her pregnant form, her pale face twisted in pain, arms cradling her belly. In an instant, his eyes widened with concern. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Naima swayed on her feet, another contraction tearing through her. She clutched Theo's arm to steady herself, her earlier adrenaline fading into renewed agony. "My babies. I think I'm in labor," she managed to gasp. The world tilted around her, and she felt strong arms catch her before she fell. Theo quickly guided her back toward her car. "You're Preston's wife, aren't you?" "Mrs. Aldridge?" he asked urgently, having put the pieces together. Naima nodded weakly, too overwhelmed to question how surreal this was. Here she was, collapsing in the arms of her husband's worst enemy, and yet he was the only one around to help. "Hang on, we're going to get you to the hospital," Theo assured, his voice firm despite the evident concern in his eyes. He opened the passenger door of her car and gently helped her in. Naima cried out as she settled into the seat, her clothes soaked and her whole body trembling. Theo knelt down to look her in the eye, rain dripping from his face. "County General is just a couple of miles away. I'll drive you there right now. Do you have anyone else coming?" "My husband, he's at the Grand Vista," Naima whimpered, struggling to speak between quick breaths. "He's not answering. I tried. And my friend." She stopped, squeezing her eyes shut as pain rippled through her midsection. Theo's jaw tightened. He had been at the Grand Vista himself moments ago, likely leaving the same event Preston attended. He knew exactly where her husband was, and that Preston had clearly not come to her aid. A flash of anger crossed Theo's features, but was quickly replaced by resolve. "It's okay, I'm here now. Let's focus on you and the babies." He sprinted around to the driver's side and slid in. Without hesitation, he took command of the vehicle, flipping on the hazard lights and accelerating through the intersection. "Stay with me, Naima," he said, using her first name gently, though they had never been introduced. Under any other circumstance it might have felt improper, but in this moment, formalities didn't matter. He was quite literally her only hope. Naima nodded, biting back a sob as another contraction built. She gripped the door handle with white knuckles and let out a ragged breath. "It hurts. It hurts so much," she whispered, voice cracking. Fear etched her delicate features. The twins. It's too early for them, she cried, tears mixing with the rainwater on her face. Theo's eyes darted toward her with empathy. I know you're scared. Just keep breathing. We're almost there. He maneuvered the car through the storm with skill, honking the horn and flashing lights to clear a path. The hospital's glowing red emergency sign came into view like a beacon. See that? Just hold on a little longer. Naima clung to his words. She focused on the red glow ahead, inhaling deeply as he'd instructed. But suddenly, her body betrayed her. A powerful contraction hit, and this time, she felt a distinct sensation of something shifting downward, an urge to push. Her water broke then in a sudden flood, warm fluid mixing with the rain on the car seat. Oh God! She gasped, panic flooding her senses. Theo, my water broke. I can feel the baby. Theo's head snapped in her direction, alarmed. He could see the fluid and understood the implication. Just a minute more. We're right here, he said, voice tight. The ER entrance was yards away. He swung the car under the awning and threw it into park so abruptly the tires squealed. Almost before the car had stopped, Theo leapt out and shouted for help. I need a gurney. Pregnant woman in labor, twins, possible complication. Hospital staff sprang into action. A nurse and an orderly rushed out with a stretcher. Theo carefully opened Naima's door. She was almost delirious with pain now, eyes glazed and breathing erratically. Help, please, she whimpered, reaching out. Theo didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms, her drenched coat falling away as he lifted her. Naima felt the solid warmth of him holding her, and she instinctively curled into his chest, gripping his soaked shirt. It's okay, I've got you, he murmured, his voice a low anchor of calm in the chaos. He laid her on the gurney as gently as possible. Immediately the medical team took over, strapping monitors on her belly and checking her vitals. The nurse's face grew serious as she noted Naima's rapid pulse and high blood pressure. She's hypertensive and possibly in early labor with twins. Let's move, people. As they rushed inside, Naima's vision blurred. She was vaguely aware of bright fluorescent lights zooming overhead and a cacophony of voices, the ER coming alive around her. She felt a grip on her hand and turned her head weakly. Theo was jogging alongside the gurney, his hand firmly holding hers, unwilling to leave her alone amidst the sea of strangers. I'm here, he said, meeting her eyes. His hair was a mess, suit disheveled, but he offered a reassuring smile that somehow cut through her terror. You're not alone, Naima. I'm right here. Naima's throat tightened, not with fear this time, but with gratitude. She squeezed his hand as another contraction racked her body. A guttural groan escaped her lips. The nurse motioned to Theo. Sir, we need to prep her for an emergency C-section. One of the babies is in distress. The words were like a dagger to Naima's heart. Her baby in distress? She started to sob, overwhelmed by a wave of dizziness and despair. My babies. Please, save them, she cried to anyone who was listening. Theo tightened his grip on her hand. They will. You'll be okay, I promise. He locked eyes with the nurse. Her obstetrician is Dr. Evans. Please page them, and make sure she has the best care, all right? There was an authoritative weight to his tone. In that moment he sounded every bit the billionaire CEO used to giving orders. The staff gave quick nods, busy preparing Naima for surgery. They wheeled Naima toward the operating room. At the double doors, a doctor in scrubs gently stopped Theo. Sir, you can't go beyond this point unless your family. The word family hung in the air. Naima's heart clenched. Her family should have been here. Her husband should have been here, but he wasn't. She looked at Theo, panic in her eyes as the gurney began to roll away from him. She had never felt so frightened and alone. Theo made a split-second decision. I'm her friend, he lied. Or perhaps it was true now in a way neither could have anticipated. She has no one else here. Let me stay, please. The doctor hesitated, seeing Naima's distressed state. In the end, compassion won. They thrust a set of sterile scrubs at Theo. Put these on quickly. She's going under general anesthesia because of her blood pressure. We need to move fast. As Theo hurried to comply, Naima reached for him one last time. He stepped to her side, bent down, and unexpectedly pressed a gentle, reassuring kiss to her forehead. An intimate gesture from a man who was practically a stranger, yet in that moment it felt completely natural. "I'll be right here when you wake up," he whispered. Tears slipped from Naima's eyes as the anesthesia mask was placed over her face. Her last conscious thought as the medication pulled her under was that in her final hours of need, an enemy had become her protector. The world faded to black with Theo's steady presence being the only thing that gave her comfort. A tense hush filled the operating theater, broken only by the beeping of monitors and the swift commands of doctors. Minutes felt like hours in that operating room. Theo stood near Naima's head, now dressed in clean scrubs, a cap and mask. He watched with a pounding heart as the surgical team worked with urgent precision. Though he tried to remain calm, Theo's hands were clenched tightly at his sides. He had never felt so invested, so frightened for another person's life. He silently prayed, "Hang on, Naima. Hang on, little ones." It was an odd feeling. Theo was not a particularly religious man, nor had he ever imagined himself praying for the wife of a man he despised. But here he was, offering up every scrap of hope in his soul for their safety. The surrealness of the situation was not lost on him, yet it also felt profoundly right, as if fate had placed him exactly where he needed to be. BP is 160/100 and rising. "We need to move now," one of the doctors warned. They had identified the problem: placental abruption. The storm, stress, and sudden labor had likely caused the placenta to begin separating too early, cutting off the baby's oxygen. It was a life-to-threatening complication for mother and child. Theo overheard a nurse say in a low voice, if she'd gotten here any later, leaving the rest unsaid. He felt a chill. They were truly racing against time. The obstetrician, Dr. Evans, arrived just in time to perform the emergency C-section. Theo stepped back a pace, not wanting to interfere but unable to tear his eyes from the scene. Through a small opening in the sterile drape, he glimpsed Naima's unconscious face. Calm, almost as if she were merely sleeping, despite the chaos around her. He swallowed hard. She looks so peaceful. Please let her live to open those eyes again, he thought. Within moments, the first baby was lifted out. A nurse quickly carried the tiny newborn to a warmer. Theo held his breath, straining to hear. A second passed, then another. Finally, a fragile cry filled the air. Baby number 1, small but seemingly a fighter, announced her arrival. Theo realized he had been holding his breath and let it out in a whoosh, tears prickling behind his eyes at that sound. One baby was out, alive. Not a minute later, the second twin emerged. This time, the doctors exchanged worrisome looks. The second baby was limp, and there was no immediate cry. Theo's heart lurched as he saw the infant rush to a pediatric team in the corner. The staff worked frantically, stimulating the baby, suctioning the airway. "Come on, little guy, breathe," one of the pediatric nurses urged, gently rubbing the newborn's back. For several agonizing seconds, there was nothing. Theo felt his chest constrict. The silence was unbearable. He found himself whispering under his breath, "Please, please." At last, a weak, wobbly cry broke through. The second baby had found his voice. Theo closed his eyes briefly, feeling a wet tear escape down his cheek. He hastily wiped it away with the back of his wrist, swallowing against the lump in his throat. Both twins were alive. They were not out of the woods. He overheard the words NICU and breathing support. But they were alive. With the babies delivered, the team turned full attention to Naima. Even unconscious, her body had been through a tremendous ordeal. There was significant bleeding from the placental abruption. Theo watched in anxious silence as they transfused blood and the doctors worked to stop the hemorrhage. It was a blur of medical terms and rapid movements. At one point, the monitor alarm blared. Naima's blood pressure plummeted dangerously low. A nurse administered medication, and Dr. Evans barked for suction and more gauze. Theo realized he was trembling. He had seen high-to-stakes deals worth billions, but nothing ever felt as high stakes as this battle for a woman's life unfolding before him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lead surgeon let out a sigh of relief. Bleeding's under control. BP is stabilizing. The flurry of activity began to slow. They closed the incision and cleaned Naima up, preparing to move her to recovery. Theo had to sit down for a moment, his legs weak with relief. He ran a hand through his hair under the cap, finding it damp with sweat. It was over. She had made it. A nurse approached him, holding two tightly swaddled bundles, the twins. "Sir, would you like to see them before we take them to NICU? They're a bit premature, but doing okay for now." Theo stood, hesitant at first. Was it really his place? But one look at the tiny babies melted any resistance. He nodded gently. The nurse brought the babies closer. Twin miracles, a boy and a girl. They were impossibly small, faces red and scrunched up from the effort of crying moments ago. Each was wrapped snugly, with little knitted caps on their heads, pink for the girl, blue for the boy. The girl was whimpering softly, the boy strangely quiet and blinking up at the bright lights with curious glazed eyes. Theo's breath caught as he carefully reached out and stroked the back of the baby girl's hand with a fingertip. Her fingers were so delicate, they barely curled around the tip of his index finger. Yet, she held on with surprising strength, a tiny frown on her brow, as if to protest all the fuss. "Hello there, little one," Theo whispered, a smile lifting his tired features. Then, he looked at the baby boy. The nurse had placed him in the crook of Theo's other arm for a moment. Theo supported the tiny body awkwardly, but the boy didn't seem to mind. The baby boy blinked and made a soft coo, in that instant clutching at the collar of Theo's scrub shirt with infinitesimal fingers. A strange warmth spread through Theo's chest. He felt an immediate protectiveness for these children, the children of his rival, yet here he was feeling responsible for their very existence. If he hadn't been there, he shuddered to think what might have happened. He had never imagined this night would see him holding newborns, feeling tears of joy and relief for a family that wasn't his. It was humbling and profound. The nurse smiled at the sight. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" she said softly. Theo nodded, speechless for a moment. "They are," he finally managed, voice thick. Each baby had a hint of dark fuzz on their tiny heads. Perhaps they'd inherited their mother's hair. He wondered if their eyes would be Naima's warm amber or Preston's icy blue. Time would tell. "We'll take them to the neonatal ICU for monitoring now. You can see them again later," the nurse said, gently reclaiming the infants. "And the mother will be in recovery for a while before she wakes." Theo reluctantly let the babies go, watching as they were wheeled out in their incubator cart. The OR was nearly empty now. Only a few staff remained, preparing to transfer Naima. Theo stepped over to Naima's side, his knees feeling a bit unsteady. She looked so small and frail on the gurney, far different from the vibrant woman he had seen in photos or from afar at events. He barely knew her, yet after this night he felt inexorably tied to her and her children's fates. One of the doctors approached and placed a hand on Theo's shoulder. "You did well, Mr." The doctor realized they hadn't even exchanged names properly in the urgency. "Theodore Voss," Theo supplied quietly. "Just call me Theo." The doctor nodded. "She's very lucky you brought her in when you did, Theo. A few more minutes and we might be having a very different conversation." His tone was kind, but made the gravity clear. "We've stopped the bleeding and she's stable, but she lost a lot of blood. We'll monitor her closely. The next 24 hours are critical for her recovery." Theo looked at Naima's unconscious face, a surge of protectiveness and sorrow welling up. He imagined how terrifying it would be for her to wake up, possibly not, even knowing if her babies survived, and no familiar face by her side. He thought of Preston again, and a flare of anger sparked amid the exhaustion. Where was that man? How could he live with himself not being here? "Doctor, do you know if her husband has been informed?" Theo asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. The doctor shook his head. "I believe the staff tried contacting the number on her emergency file. No response. We'll keep trying." He sighed. These things happen. People miss calls, though one would hope a husband wouldn't at a time like this. It was the closest the professional man would come to casting judgment, but his disappointed frown spoke volumes. Theo set his jaw. "I'll make sure he knows," he said stiffly. In truth, he had half a mind to hunt Preston down right that second and knock him senseless for what had happened. But Theo wouldn't leave Naima now. Instead, he pulled out his phone and shot off a terse text to Preston's number. He had it through business contacts. "This is Theo Voss. Your wife is at County General Hospital, emergency surgery. Twins delivered. Come now if you have any decency." He hit send with a bitter punch of his thumb. With that done, Theo took a shaky breath and moved aside as the nurses wheeled Naima to recovery. He followed silently, determined to be there when she opened her eyes, to tell her that she and her children had made it through the storm. Now, I know some of you are already typing in the comments, and I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Preston deserves a second chance? Or has he already lost everything that matters? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment. And if you're watching this far and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're about to get to the confrontation between Preston, Naima, and Theo. And let me tell you, it's intense. Hit subscribe, leave a like if you're Team Theo right now, and let's keep going. Because when Naima finally opens her eyes and sees who's waiting by her bedside, everything changes. The soft beeping of monitors was the first thing Naima became aware of as she drifted back toward consciousness. Her body felt heavy, her mind foggy from anesthesia and exhaustion. She fought through the haze, eyelashes fluttering as she tried to open her eyes. Everything felt so bright and blurry at first. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was being in indescribable pain and Theo's voice promising he'd stay. Theo. The babies. Her eyes shot open fully as memory came rushing back. The emergency, the C-section. Instinctively, Naima's hands moved to her abdomen. It was flat, tightly bandaged, and sore. A flood of panic and questions rose in her throat. My babies. Are they okay? Before she could speak, a warm hand gently clasped hers. Naima? Hey, you're awake. Theo's voice, gentle and low, came from her bedside. Her vision cleared enough to see him sitting beside her hospital bed. He was out of the scrubs now, wearing a fresh shirt someone must have given him, and his face bore the signs of an emotional night, tired eyes, worry lines on his brow. But he managed a small, relieved smile as she focused on him. The Theo, she croaked, her throat dry. She tried to push herself up a little. Immediately Theo was there, adjusting her pillow and pressing the nurse call button. His careful, attentive movements were like those of an old friend, not a stranger she'd met under 4 hours ago. It was oddly comforting. Easy, he said softly. You've been through a lot. Here, a little water. He offered her a cup with a straw, holding it as she took grateful sips. The cool water soothed her parched throat. Naima took a shaky breath, gathering the courage to ask the question burning inside. My babies, the twins. Her eyes searched Theo's face desperately, fearing what she might see. Theo's tired face lit up with a reassuring smile. They're alive, he said, and Naima released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, tears springing to her eyes. A baby girl and a baby boy, right? They're a bit small since they're early, but they cried just fine. The doctors have them in the NICU for now, as a precaution. But from what I hear, they're doing well for premature twins. A sob of relief burst from Naima's chest. She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her children were okay. The overwhelming gratitude and love she felt made her weak. Thank you, Theo, she whispered between sobs. She reached out and grasped his hand tightly. How could she ever thank this man enough? He had saved her life and the lives of her babies. Theo shook his head, squeezing her hand in return. You don't need to thank me. I'm just so relieved I was there. His voice turned a bit hoarse, emotion glinting in his eyes as well. He cleared his throat. You were incredibly brave, you know. You held on, and you saved those little ones by fighting as hard as you did. Naima wiped at her tears, her strength slowly returning. As the initial surge of relief settled, another realization hit her. Preston. Where was Preston? Surely he would be here by now if Theo had contacted him. She glanced around the room, almost expecting to see her husband emerge from a shadow, remorseful and worried. But the doorway was empty, and only Theo's steadfast presence occupied the room. Reading her expression, Theo's jaw tightened slightly. He looked like he was debating something. Then he spoke carefully. I texted Preston. Told him what happened and that you were here. That was a couple of hours ago, right after your surgery. Naima felt her heart sink. And, did he respond? She asked in a small voice. Theo's silence was telling. He shook his head once. No, I haven't seen or heard from him. I'm sorry. There was an undertone of anger in his last words that he tried to hide. Fresh tears filled Naima's eyes, but these were not of relief. They were of hurt and humiliation. Even now, after nearly losing her and the babies, Preston hadn't come. It was like a knife twisting in her heart. How could the man she loved, the father of her children, abandon them at such a critical moment? The reality was almost too painful to accept. I begged him, Naima whispered, voice trembling. Before all this, I begged him to come home. I knew something was wrong, and he ignored me. She closed her eyes, a few tears leaking out despite her effort to hold them back. What was so important that he couldn't be here? We almost died. Her voice broke on the last word. Theo couldn't contain his frustration. His free hand curled into a fist on his knee. He was at that investor dinner, trying to one-up me in front of the whole board, he said bitterly. When I left, I think he was finalizing a deal. Maybe he stayed to celebrate. The disgust in Theo's tone was evident. He tried to rein it in for Naima's sake, taking a breath. I'm sorry. You don't need this right now. But Naima shook her head. She needed the truth, however painful. No, don't apologize. I'd rather know. Her eyes opened, and what shone within them was a mix of sorrow and a burgeoning resolve. Theo, I could have died tonight. My babies could have died. And Preston wasn't there, but you were. Her grip on Theo's hand tightened, as if clinging to the one solid thing in the whirlwind her life had become. Before Theo could respond, a commotion sounded from the hallway. A familiar voice, raised and demanding, echoed through the partially open door. I'm her husband. Let me in. Preston. Naima tensed, her heart thudding. Preston was finally here. Theo's eyes narrowed as he stood protectively beside Naima's bed. The door burst open, revealing Preston Aldridge in a crumpled suit, hair damp. Weather, from rain or sweat, was unclear, and an expression of frantic alarm on his face. A nurse trailed behind him, trying to protest his abrupt entry. Naima! Preston rushed forward, stopping short a few feet from the bed when he registered. Theo's presence, and the sight of his wife lying pale and weak. His eyes darted from Naima to Theo, confusion and irritation flaring. What is he doing here? He snapped, clearly perturbed to find his nemesis at his wife's bedside. Theo squared his shoulders but held his tongue, glancing at Naima. This was her moment, not his. He wasn't about to start a fight in front of her hospital bed, unless necessary. Naima took a shaky breath, summoning strength from a well she wasn't sure she had. Preston, she said softly, her voice carrying a world of hurt. You came. Preston stepped closer, trying to take her hand. Theo reluctantly released it, and moved slightly aside, though he remained nearby in case Naima needed support. Preston's hand was cold and trembling as it enveloped Naima's. I got here as soon as I heard, I swear, he began, stumbling over his words. I didn't see the messages until later. My phone died, and then Theo's text. He trailed off, eyes glistening as he took in his wife's condition. God, Naima, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. Are you all right? The babies. Naima withdrew her hand from his grasp, tears slipping down her face. It hurt to look at him, the man she loved, who had let her down in every possible way on the most critical night of their lives. The babies are in the NICU, she answered quietly. They're alive, thanks to Theo. And the doctors. She couldn't help the slight emphasis on who had been there for her. Preston shot an uneasy look at Theo, who stood at the foot of the bed, with arms crossed, silent, but with eyes that spoke volumes of judgment. Preston cleared his throat. "I'm grateful. Truly," he muttered, though it sounded hard for him to admit. He turned back to Naima. I thought it was just false alarms when you texted. I was in the middle of the deal we've been working on for months. I made a mistake. He reached out as if to caress her face, but Naima leaned away, pain and disappointment etched on her features. "A mistake?" she echoed, voice trembling with rising emotion. "Preston, I begged you. I told you I was scared, that something was wrong. What more could I have said or done? Did I need to be dying for you to take me seriously?" Her volume rose, years of pent-up hurt surfacing. Her chest heaved, and monitors began to beep as her heart rate climbed. The nurse hovered, concerned. "Ma'am, please calm down. You need rest," she urged gently. Theo stepped nearer to Naima, his face full of concern. "Naima, it's all right. You don't have to do this now." But Naima shook her head fiercely, even as tears blurred her vision. "No, I do have to," she insisted, locking eyes with her husband. "Preston, I could have lost our children tonight. I nearly lost my life. Do you understand that?" Preston's face went ashen. He looked genuinely shaken. "Don't say that, please. I know, I'm sorry. I was stupid and blind. I thought it was just another one of those days, and that you'd be fine, like always." "Like always?" Naima let out a bitter laugh through her tears. "Because I've had to be fine on my own for months now. Did you think that because I didn't collapse earlier that everything was okay? I was terrified, Preston. Every single day you were gone. I was terrified something like this would happen when you weren't there." Her voice cracked, revealing the depth of her fear and sorrow. Preston's eyes brimmed with tears now. I know I failed you." He sank to his knees by the bed, a posture of defeat and remorse. "Naima, I have no excuse. None. I was so caught up in beating Theo, in closing that deal, I lost sight of what really matters, you, our family. I thought I was doing it for us, but I see now it means nothing if it costs me you and the kids." He reached for her hand again. This time she didn't pull away, but she remained tense. "Can you ever forgive me? I'll do anything to make this right. I'll step down from work, I'll go to therapy, whatever it takes. Just please don't leave me. I love you, I swear I do. I'm just a fool." Naima's heart ached seeing him broken like this. This was the man she had fallen in love with, or at least a glimpse of him, vulnerable and sincere. Part of her wanted to reach out and wipe his tears, to forgive and comfort him. But another part, stronger now, remembered the loneliness, the cold, empty nights, and the sheer betrayal of his absence in her darkest hour. Love should be shown through actions, not just words spoken after the damage is done. She gently withdrew her hand, her decision evident in her weary eyes. "Some things can't be undone, Preston," she said softly, sorrowfully. "I'm glad you're sorry. I truly hope you mean it. But right now, I need to focus on recovering and on our children. I can't think about us." She couldn't bring herself to say more, but the implication hung in the air. Preston's face crumpled. He looked to Theo as if noticing him anew, and an expression of pain and jealousy flickered. "So what now? You'll trust a stranger over me?" he asked bitterly, a flash of his pride resurging at the worst time. "He's my enemy, Naima. You can't actually—" "Stop!" Naima cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp. Theo was hardly a stranger now. He had proven himself in ways her husband had not. "Theo saved my life. He saved your children's lives. Enemy or not, he showed me more care tonight than I've felt from you in a long time." Theo raised a hand slightly, as if to calm things. He finally spoke up, tone measured. "Preston, I think it's best if you leave and let her rest. You've apologized, he's heard you, but this stress isn't good for her recovery." Preston rose, anger flashing in his eyes. "I don't need you telling me what's best for my wife," he spat. then immediately regretted it, wincing. He turned back to Naima, voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I'm messing everything up. I'll go, okay? But I'll be back later, please. I want to see the twins and be here for you, if you'll let me." Naima closed her eyes, tears slipping out. She gave a small nod, unable to speak that moment. She wouldn't bar him from seeing his children, but her heart wasn't ready to grant him absolution or closeness yet. Taking that as acceptance, Preston slowly backed away. "I'll come by the NICU and talk to the doctors," he murmured. "And I'll see you later." He left the room, shoulders hunched in defeat. The nurse followed, casting a sympathetic look at Naima and a nod of gratitude to Theo for helping calm the situation. In the quiet that followed, Naima felt utterly drained. She sank back into her pillows, sobbing softly. It was too much to process. The hurt, the relief, the uncertain future. Theo gently sat down again and, after a moment's hesitation, reached out to brush a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was tender, without agenda, simply a kind-hearted attempt to comfort. "I'm sorry you had to go through that now," he said quietly. But I think he needed to hear it. Naima managed a weak nod, sniffing. "Thank you for standing by me," she said, her voice raw. She realized she had thanked him multiple times now, and words felt insufficient. But Theo just shook his head kindly. "I meant what I said earlier. You're not alone." He hesitated, then added, "I can step out if you want some privacy, or I can stay. Whatever you need, Naima." She looked at this man, this supposed enemy of her husband who had become her guardian angel tonight. In his face, she saw concern and a protectiveness that both surprised and comforted her. "Stay, please," she whispered. So Theo stayed. He sat by her side in that dim recovery room, keeping watch over her through the rest of the night. Whenever she stirred or winced, he was there to adjust her blanket or call a nurse. In the moments when she quietly cried, he offered his hand for her to hold, absorbing her pain in supportive silence. A bond was forming in those still hours before dawn, fragile and unlikely, yet deep and very real. Outside, the storm had finally passed, giving way to a calm grey morning. A new day had arrived, carrying with it the aftermath of tragedy averted and the uncertain promise of tomorrow. 2 days later, sunlight filtered softly through the curtains of Naima's hospital room. It had been 2 days since the dramatic night of the twins' birth, and each new dawn brought more strength to Naima's body and clarity to her mind. She was moved out of intensive recovery to a private room, and the twins remained in the NICU gaining strength. Every few hours, Naima would shuffle slowly down the hall to visit her babies, with Theo often at her side for support. During those visits, Naima would gently slip her hand into the incubator, caressing her tiny son's arm or letting her daughter's fingers curl around her pinky. They were improving steadily. The girl was breathing on her own now, and the boy only needed a little oxygen support. The nurses assured her that both infants were doing remarkably well for 35-week twins. It filled Naima with pride and relief to see her children fighting, there, little chests rising and falling steadily as if determined to live. On one such visit, Naima was sitting in a rocking chair by the incubators, humming a lullaby as she held her daughter skin to skin against her chest. The nurses had finally permitted short, supervised holds. Theo sat nearby, watching the tender scene in respectful silence. In the quiet hum of the NICU, amidst beeps and whispered conversations, something shifted between them. Theo's eyes softened as he observed Naima's motherly love on full display, and Naima, glancing over at him, realized how much comfort she'd found in his presence. Preston had been to see the twins earlier that morning, but left quickly, sensing Naima's guarded demeanor. He was giving her space, as she had requested. Every day he came, brought flowers or supplies, and every day he apologized again. Naima acknowledged him politely, but her heart was still too bruised to allow more than that. Preston's pain was evident, dark circles under his eyes, a tentative, hollow way he moved. He looked like a man in the throes of losing everything dear to him, and for now, Naima couldn't absolve him of that. After one such brief encounter with her husband, Naima had returned to her room visibly shaken. Theo had offered a supportive arm and a listening ear. They talked in low tones while she rested. She expressed her fears and confusion, and Theo listened without judgment. He offered insights when appropriate, but mostly he let her unburden her soul. One afternoon, while a soft rain drizzled outside the hospital windows, Naima shared something deeply personal. "Before all this, I used to paint," she said quietly, tracing the pattern on her blanket. "I was an artist. I even had a small gallery show downtown a few years ago, before the twins and before Preston's company took off. But when things got hectic, I put my dreams on hold to support his. I told myself I'd get back to it someday, but I haven't picked up a brush in over a year." Theo looked at her thoughtfully. This was a side of her he hadn't known, a creative soul, full of color and imagination. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked gently, curious what thought process had led her here. Naima gave a small shrug, smiling sadly. "Maybe because I feel like I lost myself along the way. I devoted everything to being the perfect wife for Preston, thinking that was the right thing to do. And he," she swallowed, voice thick with emotion, "he didn't value it. I realize now I gave up so much of myself and still ended up alone when it mattered. I don't want to lose myself again. For anyone." A tender silence followed. Theo nodded slowly. "I understand more than you might think," he said. He hesitated, then shared a piece of his own story. "My rivalry with Preston. It wasn't just business. We used to be friends years ago, believe it or not." He offered a wry smile at her look of surprise. "We were in the same startup incubator, young, hungry entrepreneurs. We even collaborated on a project at one point. But when investors came knocking, Preston maneuvered behind my back and claimed the core idea was entirely his. He cut me out." Naima gasped softly. She hadn't known this history. "That's terrible." Theo shrugged, though pain flickered in his eyes. "That's business," some would say. "It hurt, not just the betrayal, but also losing the friend I thought I had. Since then, I've been driven to outdo him, to prove I didn't need his charity. I became obsessed too, in a different way, obsessed with winning." He looked down, fiddling with his watch. "When I saw you that night, collapsed in the street, I recognized you immediately from photos. I knew who you were, and a part of me thought, this is Preston's wife." He sighed, guilt clouding his expression. "Naima, if I'm honest, at first I wondered if fate was handing me some strange leverage or revenge. You know, the irony of me saving the day when he failed. But the moment you cried out, all those thoughts disappeared. You were just a mother in need, a person in pain. Nothing else mattered. And later, when I stayed by you, I wasn't thinking of him at all. I wanted to make sure you were okay." Naima reached out and touched his arm, offering comfort now as he grew a bit emotional. "What you did, no one could doubt it was from the goodness of your heart, Theo. Even if you had initial thoughts of rivalry, you stayed for me. I felt it." He met her eyes, a hint of relief and gratitude in them. "You know, in saving you and your twins, I think in a way you saved me too," he said quietly. "You made me remember that beneath all the pride and business armor, I'm still human, that I can care about people more than profits." I had been so, closed off, especially after how Preston burned me. I didn't let anyone get close. But these past days, getting to know you, holding those little babies, he chuckled softly, "I've changed. And I'm glad for it." A warmth spread through Naima's chest at his confession. There was something blossoming here between them, trust, understanding, maybe even the seeds of affection. It felt unexpected, yet natural. That evening, Naima insisted on being taken in a wheelchair to the hospital's small chapel. She wanted a quiet place to reflect. Theo accompanied her, ever the supportive presence. Inside the chapel's hushed serenity, Naima lit a candle for gratitude. She prayed silently, giving thanks for her children's survival, for her own life, and yes, for the unlikely guardian who had stepped in. When she finished, she found Theo kneeling a few pews back, head bowed. She didn't know if he was praying or simply lost in thought, but the sight touched her deeply. As they left, Naima impulsively placed her hand over Theo's on the wheelchair handle. "Theo, I don't know what the future holds for me now," she began softly, "but I know I want to live differently. For myself and for my kids. I won't stay in a marriage that makes me feel unloved and unsafe. I deserve better than that." "You do," Theo agreed, his voice firm. "You deserve the world, Naima. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. You have my help, my friendship, always." He hesitated, as if weighing whether to continue, then mustered the courage. "And if, and only if, you're ever open to something more, beyond friendship. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I haven't felt something growing between us." His cheeks flushed slightly, an endearing hint of vulnerability. "But I know it's early, and you're healing. So I'm not pushing, I want you to know that you're not alone, and you won't be, no matter what you choose." Naima's heart skipped a beat. Hearing him articulate what she too had tentatively felt made her both nervous and excited. She had never imagined in her worst nightmare of that night that it would lead to an emotional bond with Preston's rival. Life was strange and unpredictable indeed. "Theo, these last days you've shown me such kindness and care. You've made me laugh even in the hospital, listened to me, protected me. I can't deny I feel a connection too." She offered him a gentle smile. "It frightens me a little. So much has happened so fast. But I won't pretend it's not there." Theo smiled then, a genuine bright smile that reached his blue eyes. "That's all I needed to hear. We can go as slow as you need. I'm a patient man when something is worth it." They shared a warm look, an unspoken understanding passing between them. In that quiet moment, with the smell of candles and faint music from the chapel, a new chapter was beginning for both. It was one of tentative hope and affection. They didn't kiss or embrace just yet. It was too soon, and they both respected that. But they held hands as Theo wheeled Naima back to her room, a simple act that felt both comforting and charged with promise. A week later, Naima was discharged from the hospital. The twins, named Lila for the girl and Jaden for the boy, were healthy enough to come home as well after a brief NICU stay. Their release was a joyous day. Naima wept tears of happiness as she carefully dressed each tiny baby in the going. Home outfits she had packed weeks ago, a yellow onesie with ducks for Lila and a green one with turtles for Jaden. Theo had been a constant pillar of support, helping arrange a safe ride home, and even installing the infant car seats with the precision of someone who had researched it thoroughly. Preston arrived at the hospital to join for the discharge, looking hopeful but apprehensive. He had clearly tried to clean himself up, a fresh shave, a bouquet of Naima's favorite lilies in hand, but he lingered by the door, uncertain of his place. He watched as Naima carefully settled into a wheelchair, hospital policy for mothers. Upon discharge, with Lila in her arms, and Theo gently lifted Jaden's carrier. It was an image that both warmed and stung, his wife and children safe, but another man seamlessly involved in their departure. At home, which for now was still the grand suburban house Naima and Preston shared, a difficult conversation awaited. The car ride was mostly silent, and once the babies were fed and asleep in their crib, blissfully, oblivious to the adult dramas around them, Naima and Preston sat down in the living room. Theo excused himself to the porch to give them privacy, though he made sure Naima knew he wasn't leaving till she was okay. Preston clasped his hands, sitting on the sofa, where just a week ago Naima had sat crying alone. His eyes took in the scene, the vase of dying anniversary roses he had sent belatedly, the cold remnants of that special dinner she'd made, still in the fridge, untouched. Regret hung heavy in the air. "Naima," he began quietly, "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know I truly am sorry. I lost sight of everything important. I thought providing for you was enough, that you were strong enough to handle me being absent. I was wrong. I failed as a husband and nearly as a father." Naima looked at him, steady but sad. "Yes, you did," she said, not to twist the knife, but to acknowledge reality. "Preston, I have replayed that night in my mind 100 times. The truth is, if not for Theo, we might not be having this conversation. I might not be here at all." Her voice trembled, but she maintained her composure. That is something I can't just forget or sweep under the rug. Preston wiped a tear from his eye. I don't expect you to. I lie awake each night thinking of it too. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I still hope for one. I'm willing to do anything. Counseling, stepping back from work. I've already started the process with the board. The board can handle the company for now. None of it matters to me without you. Naima gave a small, sad smile. It took nearly losing us for you to realize that. There was a long pause. She looked at her hands, gathering courage. Preston, I loved you. Part of me probably always will, as the father of my children and the man I spent so many years with. But I can't go back to how things were. I won't. His face crumpled, but he nodded in understanding. I accept that. I hurt you far too much. But maybe we could start fresh? I could court you again, show you I've changed. She shook her head gently. I don't think I can, even if I wanted to. It's not just about you changing, it's about me changing too. I found a strength in myself I didn't know I had. I survived. Without you when I never imagined I could. I delivered our babies with the help of a stranger, because I had to. I realized I'm capable on my own. Preston bowed his head, silent tears falling. He understood. This was the consequence of his actions, the very real possibility that his marriage was beyond saving. Is there no hope? He asked in a broken whisper. Naima's eyes were moist, but she was firm. I think it's best we separate for now. I won't make any drastic decisions this moment. Emotions are high. But I do know I need space and time. And I need to focus on the twins and on myself. Preston inhaled shakily, then nodded. I'll move out. I can stay at the penthouse in the city. That was his original bachelor pad, kept over the years. I'll give you and the babies the space you need. But please, I want to be in their lives. I want to try to be a better father than I was a husband. A brief silence. Then Naima spoke. I would never keep them from you, unless being around you was harmful to them. If you truly are going to be better, we can arrange visitations. We'll have to figure it out. It was perhaps the most painful thing she'd ever had to say, essentially, negotiating the terms of the end of her dream, of a happy family. Tears slid down her cheeks, and Preston was openly crying now. I will be better, he vowed softly. Even if we aren't together, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, Naima. If not to win you back, then at least to ensure our children know their father isn't a total failure. They shared a long, sorrowful look. In that gaze was an unspoken farewell to the life they once envisioned together. It was tragic, yet there was a strange peace in finally confronting the truth. Preston slowly stood up. I'll pack some things and go before they wake up. It's easier that way, Naima agreed, wiping her face. Before he disappeared to the bedroom, Preston hesitated. That night, Theo texted me. I have to ask, why was he there? Why would he do all this? Naima considered her words. He was in the right place at the right time, and he did it because it was the right thing to do, Preston. He's not the villain you painted him to be. In fact, he turned out to be a good man. Possibly the best man she'd ever met, she realized internally. But she left it at that. Preston gave a slow nod, processing that. Then, with a final aching look, he turned away to gather his belongings. When he left the house that day, suitcases in hand, it was a bittersweet moment. The storm had passed, but it left in its wake a broken marriage and a fractured man. Preston's downfall was not a public spectacle of scandal or financial ruin. It was the personal loss of the people who mattered most. Yet, in accepting it, he took the first step toward a quiet redemption. True, to his word, he immediately arranged through lawyers to give Naima full access to funds for the children, didn't contest when she later filed for an official separation, and started attending therapy to confront his workaholic behaviors and emotional shortcomings. It was a long road, but he was on it earnestly. In the weeks that followed, Naima found herself transforming in ways she never expected. Empowerment became her new mantra. With 2 tiny newborns depending on her, she discovered wells of resilience and patience. Late-night feedings and diaper changes became moments of reflection, As she rocked her babies, she often thought about what kind of life she wanted to give them, what kind of role model she wished to be. She wanted Lila and Jaden to grow up seeing their mother strong and fulfilled, not diminished or living in someone's shadow. True to her word to herself, Naima picked up a paintbrush again. In stolen moments during the baby's naps, she set up an easel in the sunroom, letting colors flow on canvas to express the tempest and triumph of her recent experiences. One painting in particular took form. It depicted a dark storm with a burst of light breaking through, a literal interpretation of her rescue, with abstract figures that to her represented herself and a guiding presence. She called it Second Dawn. It was raw and cathartic, and when Theo saw it, he was moved beyond words. Theo became a regular fixture in Naima's new life. At first, he visited under the pretense of checking on everyone's well-being, but it quickly evolved into something more natural. He would bring groceries, help cook dinners, as much as one could with two infants at the table, and lend a hand with midnight baby burping sessions. The twins adored him in their baby way, often falling asleep on his chest or cooing when he made funny faces. He was gentle and playful with them, and it warmed Naima's heart to see it. As the bonds deepened, so did the affection between Naima and Theo. One evening, about a month after coming home, they had just put the finally sleeping twins down, and found themselves alone in the cozy living room, soft jazz playing in the background. They sat on the couch, exhausted but happy. Theo had taken off his tie. He'd come straight from a board meeting of his own company, and was telling her about how mundane work felt nowadays compared to the joys of spending time with her and the babies. Naima laughed, suggesting maybe he'd enjoy domestic life more than boardrooms. Theo looked at her, eyes sparkling. I never imagined I'd say this, but that might be true. At least, doing this with you. It feels more meaningful than anything I've done in a boardroom. He reached out to tuck a loose strand of her hair behind her ear, fingers lingering on her cheek. You look beautiful, he murmured. And she did. Even in simple pajamas, hair messy from a long day there, was a glow about Naima born of newfound purpose and contentment. Naima felt her pulse quicken at his touch. The air between them crackled softly with an unspoken question. They had grown close, sharing little touches and warm hugs, but they had not crossed the line into open romance. Not yet. The respect Theo showed for her healing and situation only made her fall for him more. Now, the longing in his eyes mirrored her own feelings. Slowly, Naima leaned in, and Theo met her halfway. Their lips touched in a tender, gentle kiss. The first kiss, imbued with all the unspoken emotions of the past weeks. It was sweet and delicate, an exploration and a promise. Theo's hand caressed her face as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and Naima responded with equal warmth, resting a hand on his shoulder. For a few precious moments, time stopped. When they finally parted, both were smiling, foreheads resting together. I've wanted to do that for a while, Theo confessed softly, his thumb stroking her cheek. Naima laughed quietly, a joyous sound. I know. Me too. She felt a tear of happiness brim, remembering how dark and hopeless life seemed not long ago. Yet here she was, alive, loved, and hopeful. Their relationship blossomed quickly after that. It wasn't without challenges. Naima still had emotional baggage and trust issues to work through, and Theo was mindful of not overstepping as the twins had a father in Preston, but day by day they navigated it together. They went on simple dates, a picnic in the backyard while the twins napped, a stroll through the park, with the babies in a double stroller, and eventually a real dinner out, with Aisha babysitting. Each time, they grew closer, learning each other's likes, dislikes, dreams and scars. For Naima, this love was a revelation. She experienced what it felt like to be prioritized, respected, and cherished, without having to beg for it or sacrifice herself. Theo listened to her ideas, celebrated her art, and included her in his world willingly. One evening, after admiring Second Dawn, he surprised her by arranging a small gallery to exhibit, some of her pieces including that one, reigniting her art career in a supportive way. For Theo, Being with Naima and the twins brought out a softer side of him long buried. He took joy in small things, making breakfast together, changing diapers. He joked he was becoming a pro at it, reading business news aloud in funny voices to lull the babies to sleep. His board noticed he was more at peace, still shrewd in business, but less ruthless, more empathetic to his employees. It was as if love had humanized him in all the best ways. While love and growth filled Naima and Theo's days, Preston walked a hard road of repentance. True to his word, he resigned as CEO of Aldridge Innovations, citing personal reasons. The news media was abuzz for a while. Speculation ran from illness to scandal, but the truth remained relatively private. Insiders knew he had lost the drive, and that perhaps a rivalry had ended. Not with a dramatic corporate defeat, but with a personal epiphany. Stepping back from work was both humbling and freeing for Preston. Without 12-hour office days, he had ample time to reflect on his mistakes. He kept up with therapy, slowly unpacking issues of ego, validation, and how he had let his priorities skew. It was painful, facing the ugliest parts of himself. Many nights he would reach for his phone to call Naima and then stop, knowing it wasn't her job to console him anymore. He channeled some of his restless energy into something positive, volunteering. It started when he donated a large sum to County General's maternity ward as a quiet thank you for saving his family. But a wise counsellor suggested he give time, not just money, to truly heal. So Preston found himself spending a few hours each week at a community centre for underprivileged families, ironically working with soon-to-be fathers on parenting classes. Teaching others about the importance of being present for your family, he hoped, might cement those lessons in his own soul. It was awkward at first. He was no expert in parenting, clearly, but he shared his regrets as cautionary tales, and slowly, it became something he was passionate about. As for his relationship with his children, that too was a journey of penance. In the first couple of months, he came by the house for short, pre-arranged visits, always respectful of Naima's comfort level. Seeing Theo seamlessly integrated with the twins was a bitter pill, but he had no one to blame but himself. Despite any jealousy or pain, Preston made an effort to focus on the babies. During his visits, learning to feed them, change them, play with them, the first time baby Jaden smiled at him, Preston nearly broke down. It felt like forgiveness he didn't deserve, but he cherished it. A turning point came one Saturday when Preston arrived as usual and found Theo alone with the twins. Naima had stepped out to the art supply store for a rare personal errand, at Theo's urging. It was awkward. The two men who once competed fiercely now stood in a nursery. Together, one gently rocking Lila, the other holding a diaper bag. They both paused, unsure how to act. Theo offered a polite nod. Naima will be back soon. I was just about to give Lila her bottle. Preston cleared his throat. I can take it from here. If you want to, have a break. He didn't say it with malice, more like an olive branch. Theo studied him for a moment, then gently transferred the baby girl into her father's arms. He handed Preston the warm bottle. Lila's tiny hands pawed eagerly, recognizing feeding time. Preston sat in the rocker and began feeding her. An emotional silence fell. Theo busied himself lightly tidying the changing station, giving a semblance of privacy. After a while, Preston spoke up, voice low. Thank you, Theo. Theo turned. For what? For saving them. For saving Naima. And for stepping up, being here when I wasn't. As much as it hurts, I'm grateful my family had you to count on. Preston's eyes remained on his infant daughter, who was suckling contentedly, oblivious to the complicated feelings in the room. Theo approached, hands in his pockets. He appreciated how hard that admission must have been for Preston. You're welcome, he replied sincerely. I did what anyone decent would do. Preston shook his head. Not anyone. I know plenty who wouldn't. I also know we had our differences. That I wronged you in the past. I am sorry for that too. It seems apologies are all I have to give lately. Theo offered a faint smile. Water under the bridge. Honestly, these days I'm not looking backward. There's a lot to be thankful for and look forward to. Preston nodded. understanding the double meaning. He glanced up, meeting Theo's gaze. "You love her, don't you?" Theo didn't flinch or deny it. "With all my heart," he said quietly. There was no gloating, no triumph in his tone, just simple truth. "And I love those kids as if they were my own. But I know they're not, and I respect that you'll always be their father." Hearing that both comforted and pained Preston. "Maybe biologically," he murmured, "but fatherhood is more than genes. I'm learning that the hard way. They're lucky to have you as a father figure, or whatever you want to call it." He swallowed thickly. "It's a bitter pill, but if she chooses you, I won't stand in the way. I want her to be happy, and them to be safe, even if it leaves me on the outside." Theo was struck by the genuine remorse and humility in Preston's words. This was a far cry from the arrogant rival he knew. It seemed the downfall, losing his family's love, had indeed stripped Preston to his core, revealing a man capable of growth. That was a partial redemption in itself. When Naima returned home, she found the two men calmly chatting while the twins napped, an empty bottle on the table. The sight nearly made her drop her paint supplies in surprise. They looked up at her almost sheepishly, an unspoken acknowledgement passing among all three that things were different now, not perfect or entirely resolved, but civil and even respectful. It was all she could hope for in the circumstances. A year later, the changes that began on that stormy night had fully blossomed into a new reality for everyone involved. Life had found a new balance, though marked by both gain and loss. It was a bright afternoon at the park, the same park where months ago, Theo and Naima had walked timidly with the babies, forging their bond. Now, they strolled hand in hand with confidence and contentment. Theo pushed a double stroller where 1-year-old Lila and Jaden babbled and giggled at the world around them. Under a big oak tree, they spread a blanket for a little picnic. Lila was already pulling herself up to stand with the sturdiness of a toddler determined to walk, while Jaden, who had just started taking his first wobbly steps, chose to crawl after a colourful ball Theo had brought, the faster option for now. Naima laughed as she watched them, her heart full. Theo slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close as they knelt together on the grass. "They're really growing up fast," he mused, catching Lila as she wobbled and plopped into his lap. She squealed in delight. Naima nodded, brushing a kiss on top of Jaden's curls when he crawled back to her. "Faster than I imagined." Every day, they learned something new. Yesterday, Lila said something that almost sounded like "Dada," and I wasn't sure which one of you she meant. She looked at Theo teasingly. Theo's face glowed with pride. "I'd be honored if it was me, but I won't steal that title. Not officially, anyway." He tickled Lila, making her giggle. In truth, both twins had come to recognize two father figures in their lives. An unusual situation that remarkably worked out through cooperation and love. After the separation, Naima and Preston amicably co-parented. Preston had a scheduled day each week to spend time with the twins, and, over the year, he proved to be consistent and caring in those times. Gradually, Naima allowed him a bit more access as trust rebuilt, never to the point of reconciliation, romantically, but enough that the children would know their father as a loving presence. It was bittersweet for everyone, for Preston, who loved his kids but still yearned privately, for the family wholeness he squandered, for Naima, who was happy with Theo but still had moments of sadness that her children would grow up in a split family, and for Theo, who had to balance loving the twins as if they were his while respecting they weren't solely his to claim. On that sunny day, as they enjoyed the picnic, a familiar figure approached. Preston had arrived for his visit as planned, carrying a wrapped present for the twins' upcoming first birthday. He gave a small wave. His demeanor was calm, a bit reserved. He had grown gentler over the year, less brash, more introspective. Theo greeted him with a nod. "Hey, Preston." Naima offered a friendly smile. They had come a long way from hostility. Time and effort had fostered a cordial relationship. It wasn't the warmth of close friends by any means, but it was respectful. The rivalry was gone, replaced by a shared concern for two little lives. Preston sat down on the blanket, immediately drawn into Jaden's joyous crawl towards him. He scooped up his son, who patted his cheeks curiously. "Heh, you missed me, buddy." Preston's eyes shone as Jaden babbled, possibly trying to say, "Da-da." Lila reached for the shiny wrapping of the gift, and Preston chuckled, handing her the box to crinkle. They spent the hour chatting lightly about the twins, their latest antics, doctor checkups, little milestones. Preston listened as Naima described how Jaden took his first step from the couch to Theo last week. There was pain in knowing he hadn't been there to see it, but he smiled, regardless, and congratulated the boy with a kiss on his forehead. He then shared proudly how he finally managed to make the twins laugh by doing a silly dance on his last solo visit, which made them all laugh picturing it. When the visit time ended, Preston handed the twins back to Naima. "I'll see you both next week, okay? Daddy loves you," he cooed at them. They gurgled happily, oblivious to the complexities. Preston stood up and turned to Theo and Naima. "Thank you for letting me join you today. It was nice." There was a lingering sorrow in his eyes, but acceptance too. He picked up his coat, preparing to leave. Naima touched his arm lightly. "You're doing good, Preston. They're lucky to have you in their life." It was a genuine affirmation. He gave a small, grateful nod. "I have you both to thank for that, for giving me the chance." His gaze shifted to Theo. There was a world of unspoken words, but he settled on, "Take care of them." It wasn't just a request, it was a bit of an apology, and a blessing rolled into one. Theo nodded solemnly. "I will. You take care too." As Preston walked away across the park, his figure growing smaller, Naima felt a mix of emotions. She was glad he had stepped up as a father and was finding a better path, but there would always be a quiet hurt in remembering how things fell apart. It was a bittersweet reality, one where everyone had lost something but also gained something new. Theo sensed her thoughts and gently squeezed her hand. "Are you all right?" he asked. She leaned into him, watching her ex-husband disappear around a bend. "I am," she said softly. "It's just, I wish it hadn't come to this sometimes, but then I think of where we are now, and I can't regret it entirely." She looked at Theo with love. "I found myself again. I found love that lifts me up. The cost was high, but it led to growth for all of us, I think." Theo pressed a kiss to her temple. "Life is complicated, huh? Not a perfect resolution in sight." "No," Naima agreed, smiling wistfully. "But maybe it's perfect in its own, imperfect way. We've all learned and grown. That counts for something." He smiled and stood, pulling Naima up with him. "Come on, let's take a little walk before we head back." He gently scooped up Lila, while Naima picked up Jaden. They strolled through the park, each carrying a twin, looking very much like a family. And indeed, they were a family. Unconventional, born from tragedy and betrayal, but bonded by love and resilience. As they walked, Naima felt the sun warm her face, and a breeze ruffle the leaves above. She looked at Theo, who was pointing out a puppy to Lila, making the baby beam. She looked at Jaden in her arms, who was resting his head on her shoulder contentedly. She felt empowered, grateful, and hopeful. The past year's trials had forged her into a stronger woman and given her a second chance at happiness. In her heart, she silently spoke to the universe, "Thank you for giving me the strength to endure and the courage to love again." It was a prayer of closure and new beginnings. And that's where we leave Naima, Theo, and the twins, a family forged not by tradition, but by choice, courage, and love that showed up when it mattered most. Naima lost a marriage, but she found herself. And Preston? He lost everything he took for granted, but finally began finding the man he should have been all along. Now I want to hear from you. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Speaking of next, I've got a powerful one coming soon. Until then, take care of yourselves and remember, you are worthy of a love that doesn't make you beg. See you in the next one.